And we're live.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Lisa. Welcome to the Dark Ozarks.
Hey, Josh. Hey, everyone. It's Wednesday.
It is Wednesday. Beautiful Wednesday.
It is.
The pollen has tried to kill me multiple times. I'm happy to say that it has thus far been unsuccessful.
Okay, so you're not an apparition.
I'm not an apparition. Not tonight.
Okay.
We'll see how things go. And I'm very, very excited about this topic. Objectivity in the paranormal. Basically, we're here to debunk everything.
Yeah, but before we get there, we have a few things we need to announce.
Yes, we do. I'll just run down the list and then we'll dig into them. Huge shout out to our amazing sponsor, Always Buying Books in Joplin, Missouri. We have this Saturday Paranormal Investigation and History Tour event at the George Ball House in Webb City. And on June 18th, Saturday, June 18th, you and I will both be at Writers Artist Night in downtown Hollister, Missouri.
Yeah, a lot coming up in less than 2 weeks. So
yeah, things are coming together well for that event. I'm State of the Ozarks hosts it, so a lot of the organizational management of the event is on me. Paranormal Science Lab hosts the Ball House on Saturday.
Yes, and at 5:00 on Saturday we will be at Always Buying Books. So
yeah,
actually doing a little filming and probably broadcasting. And so if you want to say hi, come by and say hi.
Know it. We'd love to visit with you. And I am really looking forward to this. I have books from Always Buying Books, but I have not been to the bookstore. Our amazing sponsor, Always Buying Books in Joplin, Missouri, right on historic Route 66. And where can folks go to follow Always Buying Books?
You can follow them here on Facebook. Just type in Always Buying Books. It's the top return for page, and they have a website, alwaysbuyingbooks.net. But if you follow on Facebook, they put specials and sales and just neat items that you can purchase off of there. So it's a good place to follow.
It really, really is. And for more information at Writers Artist, just go to stateoftheozarks.net. With the Ball House, what can folks expect, and can they still get tickets?
There are a few tickets left, so you can purchase them at the website paranormalsciencelab.com. We're going to have a history presentation about some of the history of the local area, including some of the notorious hauntings in the Webb City area. Tour the house and have a live investigation. And yes, the house is beautiful and has a rich history. So
it does. And I'm going to conjecture a little bit based upon our open tours or history tours and paranormal investigations at pardon me, at the Kendrick House and at the Ritchie Mansion in Newtonia, that many people may be very interested to get to do this because it is a unique opportunity to be able to go inside these beautiful historic structures that we normally just drive by, maybe wonder what is it like to be inside. This is an opportunity to actually find out.
That's right. And events do benefit the locations. And at the Ball House, they are in a process of renovating, restoring certain parts of the house. The inside is pretty well done and is gorgeous. I think the porch is the next thing they're going to be working on. So, and it's a beautiful wraparound porch. So, all events just support being able to preserve these structures that are, people. It's funny. People were always like, "Oh, it's a shame they tore that building down," or this or that. But most people don't realize what all it takes to keep a place going. And so, if you're interested in the history, support them.
Exactly. It is one of those things. The restoration and just the maintenance and upkeep of these historic structures can become incredibly expensive.
Yes, they can. Yes, they can. And particularly when you're trying to preserve the historic aesthetic too.
Exactly. Yes. which is important. And I think that that's this is a little bit of an aside, but something that we often come back to, whether you believe in the paranormal or not, and that's going to be a lot of our discussion coming up this evening, that done correctly, paranormal research or paranormal highlighting the sociological or folkloric aspects of the paranormal in a location, when done correctly, that's the caveat, can be incredibly beneficial in helping highlight, build awareness of historic locations, and in many cases, really go a long way to financially preserving, financially supporting to allow historical preservation. And that would be something I would really throw out. You're going, oh my gosh, that's crazy. Ghosts aren't real. None of this exists. Y'all crazy. Fine. But if it is supporting and allowing in a non-exploitive manner the preservation of historic districts or historic buildings for the future generation, and building interest in, the next generation is building interest in saying, oh my gosh, that's really cool because it might be haunted. I want it to stay around for a long time. What can I do to help? Then what does it hurt to conjecture?
Exactly. And also it builds awareness of local history, and that, a lot of times people don't really realize what all's going on, in a place. And so the old adage that nothing happened, or, at home, basically,
Yes.
everything's boring around where you come from. And that's not true. Very few places are really boring if you really dig into it. And
once you dig down, it's very true.
That's very true. And so, but we tend to overlook it until it's gone. And so this is one way of building that community awareness and pride.
It is. And so go to Paranormal Science Lab website and purchase tickets. There are a few remaining tickets for Saturday night, and we will see you there. It's an incredible house.
It is.
Now, from a anecdotal personal experience perspective, not perhaps a purely scientifically objective perspective, but certainly my own personal experience, is the house haunted? Yes, it is.
Yes, and you were only there for a short time, but you had experience. So
yes,
actually, everyone that was there that evening had an experience pretty much as they walked in the door. So
pretty much, lot of energy there. How much of it is an echo? How much of it may be sentient? How much of it is just some sort of encapsulated energy? Might be difficult to say, but boy howdy, Ball House is haunted, and that's my take on it. Oh, now we get to the debunking part. We're just going to debunk everything.
That's right. We may just debunk what we just said, right?
We just might. You never know. It's so we were discussing this a little bit earlier. This important separation, drawing a dividing line between existence of inexplicable phenomena, which is verifiable,
right,
as opposed to the folkloric or social or community or sociological contextualizations of the inexplicable phenomena. Of course, you have to, I think by de facto, you question the contextualizations because the phenomena is unexplained. It is inexplicable.
Right. And human beings, we love puzzles, but we don't like an unsolved one per se. Yeah. And so that's why, that's where a lot of the folkloric explanations come
Mhm.
uh, from the past, of coming up with a, rationale for why something happened.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and then those folkloric tales take on a life of their own.
They
Um,
do very
and
quickly, it sounds like.
sometimes basically people default to those first, and so that's what, oh, this happened, it's a ghost, it's a demon, it's this, it's that, it's a werewolf, it's a vampire, or whatever the case may be. um
Yeah.
and so um that's one analysis. Another analysis is, okay, so what is being observed? Is there a rationale to explain it through natural processes or man-made causes, um, that you don't have to go to the folkloric
Yes. And
explanation?
sometimes you're right. And sometimes the folkloric contextualizations, because they do take on a life of their own, almost create their own culture.
Very much so. Very much so. And you see that with the paranormal field, with some investigators, as well as a lot of enthusiasts and people who follow the field, particularly now that it's more open as far as uh, being able to access things on the internet or watch TV shows, where um, yeah, prior to really the 90s, um, if you were that interested, you were delving into books, you were delving into parapsychology magazines, and um, from the 70s on back through about the 30s, different university parapsychology departments who were trying to seriously study these things. And so it wasn't readily accessible. Um, and so now there's almost a voyeuristic aspect to it, because now everyone, pull up YouTube or whatever and watch 100 videos, and um, you can come to whatever conclusion. But um, most of that tends to default to the fantastical, um, because it's, better story, and everyone's trying to one up everyone.
Yes. And I just blame the chupacabras myself. It's all it's no longer the honey badger's fault. It is now chupacabra's fault.
There you go.
And but the I think, digging in, you mentioned videos.
Mm-hmm.
There is something incredibly compelling
Mm-hmm.
about video, and here we are. No,
Exactly.
yeah.
Well, I think for the human mind, it's a bit of magic, because it's, almost, a dream. It's like watching a dream sequence or something else. And we tend to fall into it, because we're natural storytellers and listeners, and so, when someone's telling us a story with moving pictures, it's even more entertaining. So um, we get fixated on whatever they want you to pay attention to,
Yeah.
um, or one aspect of it or another. And so you really have to look at those kind of clips very objectively, and try to take yourself outside the box and say, okay, what's going on outside the field of vision of the camera, and what makes sense, and not just, you know, believe everything that you see. And that doesn't mean that everything, that if something isn't what it appears at first notice, that they're doing it on purpose. It's not necessarily a hoax. They may be fooled too.
And that's I think
Often
that's
that
a
is.
good I think that's a really good point. We as human beings, it's very easy for us to be lulled into a sense of belief on one hand.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the fact that we watch most video in the comfort of our homes, on our phones, as we're going about our daily lives, and there is a suspension of disbelief that, oh, I watched it, so and I was safe and I was perfectly comfortable, and we just absorb the information. Now, as is typical, I think, with human behavior, it's also easy to swing the pendulum, to swing to the other extreme and classify everything as a hoax. You mentioned something, I think, right there that's really, really interesting, that while the final conclusion, or the reality of, for example, a video may not be what we initially conclude or what is suggested, that not everything is a hoax, that the individual in the room or in the location filming may simply be observing this phenomena and filming it. They may be contextualizing it
That often happens. That often happens, yes.
And in an inobjective way, but that they did not go about to create a hoax. We are going to talk about hoaxes shortly, but that in many cases they did not go about to create the hoax.
Right. That they are full just as you know, as anyone observing it. And that's one thing. And here's the thing when trying to be objective, is that this is that dichotomy of, I know what I saw.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and that's a problem, is that and this is where skeptics often will, kind of say, no, that none of this is real, because they focus on the fact that there can be tricks of the eye, that the brain can be fooled, that basically we filter out so many things that we observe. It's like on average, our brain, what we see is about 5 to 10% of the data that is actually received. And
yes.
So if either knowingly or unknowingly, that can be manipulated, or a false impression left.
Yes.
And I mean, it's the same thing, again, as a magician or an illusionist. That's the trick of their trade, is, distraction, sleight of hand, etc. That most of what happens is in plain view. You're just not paying attention to it, or
It is. And
so it's the same thing.
it is. And I think it's very humbling to embrace that reality. We all like to think that we're essentially the captains of our own ship, that we would be able to analyze all the data that's available. We know what it is that we see, and nobody can fool us.
Mm-hmm. And I think the one thing that I tend to go back to in these situations is that, yes, you saw what you saw, but now what does that mean?
What does it mean? Yes.
Yeah.
And breaking that down, and then doing analysis with the willingness to accept that the end answer may not be the one that we like.
Right. I mean, a real, sort of the easy example to give would be, say, seeing a UFO in the sky. And yes, if it's not something that's readily identifiable as a plane or a satellite or helicopter, etc., hot air balloon or whatever, then yes, it's unidentified. But does that mean that it's an alien craft? Not necessarily,
Yes.
But they did see what they saw. But
yes,
it's a matter of, what does that mean?
What does it mean and why? And and ultimately, in some of those cases, accepting the fact that at present we just don't have the answer.
Right. And sometimes it's just that there is not enough information to make an educated guess.
Mhm.
Or, maybe the educated guess is not what the observer is hoping it is either. So you have to
That
deal
is
with
very true. And so you have to continue to break that apart. Um, I'm just curious in terms of throwing this out here,
it.
an example or a type of example of an investigation in which perhaps the quote unquote client, the person asking for the investigation, has a lot of emotional investment or preconceived ideas that the investigation just doesn't line up or just does not provide what they want. What's your thought? I mean, in terms of some experiences, without obviously going into great detail.
Right. And that does happen. Often it will be surrounding the death of a loved one,
Mhm.
that someone passed, and then whatever activity is observed. And so uh, sometimes the client is really hoping that it's evidence of their loved one,
Yeah.
or a means of receiving a message. And it just may, it may, even if it's unexplained phenomena that appears perhaps to be some sort of disembodied entity or something, it may or may not be who they're hoping it is. Um, now, you know, and sometimes people get so wrapped up in this that they unwittingly perpetuate it. Uh, I, very sometimes it's very subtle with their behavior, and just sometimes an unwillingness to address perhaps another point of view, um, to the point of I've seen people, where pretty much have caught people scratching themselves and things like that to um, have something tangible to support what else is they've experienced,
Mhm.
because they get so invested in this must be.
Yes. And that's, I think, I'm going to throw this out here just in terms of a sociological or cultural
Mm-hmm.
contextualization aspect, that for many people, and I would say for myself included, we want to contextualize the world around us in a way that makes sense to us, that fits into potential belief systems and ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And in the face of extreme scientific skepticism, what I would classify as paranormal atheism. I don't know if that really fits, but I think you know what I mean. In the
Mm-hmm.
sense of just going, no, it doesn't exist. Y'all
Yep.
crazy. That it can leave people with a really unsettling sense of emptiness that is in and of itself uh, deeply compelling, or that there's a compulsion to find answers, or in some cases to create context.
Yes, and I think there's a couple of sociological aspects to this. One, um, some people will say, "Oh, it's just from um, the decline in belief in organized religion that
Mhm.
this is happening. People are seeking something to believe in." Um, and I don't necessarily buy into that entirely, but I think there's a fundamental aspect of human behavior that traditionally um, allowed for the supernatural,
Yes.
you know, apart from any religious belief. And even
Mhm.
and throughout history, certainly there were religious beliefs that incorporated the supernatural, but um, there was an acceptance of these concepts that they just were. Um, then through, particularly in the way I'm talking about the Western religions at this point, as Western religions typically became the gatekeepers of knowledge, you have to go through the church as a conduit for your truth, for your experiences. I think psychologically and culturally, there's a yearning for that. And so people kind of attach to those kind of belief systems, and they want to be able to, for many people, they want to be sort of become that conduit. I'm proof that there is something because
Yes.
of my experiences. And I think it's a very natural thing based on sort of just what has happened to culture in the last few thousand years.
I definitely, that to me, that very personally resonates. It very, very personally resonates. And you look at traditional, more, I guess, classically shamanistic societies, in which the concept of the supernatural / paranormal is oftentimes very threshold blended with everyday life. And something that I found very interesting in essentially our modernist culture, sort of our even our postmodern culture, that even quote unquote Christianity has almost become secular in its approach. Something that I have observed, and in case anybody wonders, hello, rural Southern Baptist deacon standing here. Something that I've observed, and I find this a particularly interesting concept. Many, what I would classify as modern traditionalist Christians, will talk to me and be like, how do you explain your belief in the supernatural? And I'm like,
well, by definition, if you're a Christian, you have to accept the concept of supernatural. I hate to tell them that, but it's sort of the founding tenet of the religion.
Yeah, and I'm like, interestingly enough, it's not a difficult leap for me. And there is this idea. I think this is as good a place as any to jump into this, because I've had this discussion multiple times. Is that there is, for example, within what I would classify as traditionalist, post 20th century traditional, or post mid 20th century traditionalist Christianity, which I am a child of, that it's okay to talk about the supernatural if it's God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit, but then there's nothing else,
right?
and
well,
anything else.
Well, and this may upset a few people, but that's kind of what I'm talking about. As organized religion became the gatekeeper.
Yes, I agree.
The only way that you can touch these truths is through our door.
Yes.
And it was the most oppressive in that regard, probably in the Dark Ages and in medieval times, because Mass was in Latin, and so the people they didn't even understand what the priest was saying, and so it's just like we just have to take what he says and go on, because it is all a mystery.
Yes.
Except for to a handful of highly educated people that knew Latin. But it was a way of, I hate, sorry people, but it was a way of controlling the masses, so that,
Yes.
for different purposes. And in the 20th century, then you combine that with the concept of scientific inquiry and objectivism, and so you have a dichotomy of people saying, okay, there's a supernatural, but we only talk about this much of it, but we are believers in science, so we're not really supposed to talk about this, but we believe this. So, and that becomes a quandary. And then you throw in things like The Exorcist, and then people start freaking out.
They do. They do. Especially when suddenly presented with the inexplicable. For example, Paranormal Activity starts hitting close to home, which is not uncommon.
Right. Exactly. I mean, it's not always in a castle in Europe. It's often in your house, or grandma's house or whatever.
Yes, and often very, very common. And then trying to sort that out. It can be a contextually unhinging experience if you're not, on some level, grounded in the capacity to A, think critically, but B, accept, I think, a more shamanistic or naturalistic approach to the world around us.
Exactly. And then for a lot of people, guilt got thrown in, so that if they made that kind of inquiry, then they felt that they somehow were guilty of hearsay or blasphemy, etc. And so once you start doing that with the human mind, you come up with all kinds of concepts, and that's, I think, where so many of the tropes of folklore get cemented, because we can jump to a ghost apparition or a demon or vampires, or and in different aspects of this cycle through time. You have waves of vampire scares through history, and actually not that long ago, wolves and different things. And it's all of this trying to deal with this, that we're not supposed to talk about this, but we know there's something. And so now we're in a situation that you get, as you were saying earlier, maybe before we start here, that you get people who are very open to all of this, and they see it through the lens of folklore, and then you get skeptics who say none of this is real, and then it's a matter of trying to figure out, what do you do with that?
Yes, and those answers are not easy, but I think once you inject the fact that some phenomena is inexplicable in and of itself, that beginning the process of analysis and contextualization, and sometimes just a process of elimination, what is it not?
Exactly.
And in some cases, reaching out to individuals that are trustworthy, to further analysis, and in most cases, almost all cases, understand that inexplicable phenomena, and by this time I mean Paranormal Activity, in case anybody was wondering, the Paranormal Activity in almost all cases is not dangerous. And these are things that many of us have experienced, many of us continue to experience, and in some cases it just is, like, in many cases, something we talked about on the episode last week, that you can relate it in many ways very comfortably to a wildlife experience. And so you're like observation of wildlife. So in the sense that a flock of birds flying by the window is not dangerous.
Right.
A mouse or a rat snake is not dangerous. Sometimes you do get apex predators. They are incredibly rare.
Exactly. That's a fairly good analogy. And apex predators are a lot more common than dangerous paranormal activity. So
yes,
that.
yeah. So I think that, helping people understand, we have talked about this before as well, but there is a reality, it appears to be, that there are energies at work, and when we bring highly negative or highly charged energy into contact with some of that energy, which we may or may not be aware of, sometimes it pushes back.
Right. And for people who say, oh, that's bunk, no, those things don't exist. I mean, you just have to look at Einstein. It's, spooky entanglement at a distance. I mean, that's exactly what, that's what that concept is about, is that in words for energy or matter, that it can have effect on something remotely. And I think that's one thing that people have a hard time. If I can't, quote, see it, then is it real? Well, I mean, we can't see air, we can't see magnetism, we can't see gravity, but we know it's real.
Yes.
We hope everyone knows it's real.
Yes. And I think that as time goes on, that they're over time, but I would anticipate it being over a considerable amount of time from this point, that there comes about strict scientific analyses processes that will begin to show some of this in a way that we just do not have the instrumentation for.
Oh, I think that's very true. I do think that quantum physics ultimately will answer a lot of these questions.
Which, and there are a lot of questions now. At this point, we're kind of flying blind to a large degree because we don't have a lot of that, but we do have some, and we do have some options. Really briefly, we're going to be conducting an investigation at the Ball House. I'm gonna, plug this event again, but just because it's a good intro. What are some of the analysis techniques that we will employ at the Ball House?
Well, for one thing, we focus on documentation and observation, where a lot of people will try to sort of affect things, and I do have to. I want to say to people, I saw this come up online today with an investigator in England that I know, that he was talking about someone, and showed where they were advertising that they could get rid of any ghost you had. They can banish a ghost. They can do this or that. And his comment was, well, as soon as they say that, what that means. Well, I mean, that goes back to spiritualism and charlatans. And if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Yes.
That it's I'm sorry, and that's preying on people's fears and their insecurities and being uncomfortable. And I just don't want to deal with this, and I don't want this around. So they buy into someone saying I can get rid of it. But
yes.
That's kind of like saying you can get rid of gravity.
Right. And for those of us who do subscribe to the approach that many of the energies that we're dealing with are sentient spirits, are disembodied dead people, to put it very bluntly, who for a variety of reasons have the obvious free will to remain in a location. And some of those reasons could be the stereotypical tragic unsolved or unfinished business, but in many cases could be they just wanted to.
Exactly. Or to throw a monkey wrench even in that is, are they lingering? Are they dead? Or are we interacting with another point in time? In which case, theoretically, if someone could banish them, then what are you eliminating a point in time? So we're creating some sort of paradox,
which could be very problematic. So obviously, we don't want to be doing that. Yeah. And just from a respectful of those around us. And it's something that you've said many times, and I really embrace this perspective. If you were to walk into my house and start yelling at me to get out, the results would be very bad for you.
Exactly.
And
You're be happy.
yeah, and I would probably start making things very unpleasant for you. Now, for an individual, say, for example, they move into a new house and there's paranormal activity there, you bring in someone to yell at the spirit who is living in the house, who has an energetic attachment, or you could say emotional attachment to the house, because perhaps they built it, or they've lived an entire generation in that location, and it is theirs first. And you start burning sage and yelling at them and telling them that they're supposed to leave. If you do provoke them enough, they could respond quite negatively for very understandable reasons.
Energy has effect on energy, and we are energy as well as matter. So and I have literally seen a grown man put on his butt before. So
and and I'm assuming in a context that there's no reason to be faking it.
No, actually, this was at the Olivia.
Oh, are you able to share further?
Actually in the lobby, and started provoking, and literally ended up on his backside.
Oh my gosh.
No one around, and it was very, with several people observing, and very obvious that the way it was done moved in a way that really you couldn't do it and fall the way you did, and just gravity wouldn't have allowed you to. So
okay, I shouldn't laugh, but I adore the Olivia. And the idea that there are spirits there that adore it even more than I do, and are protective and have an attitude, is honestly quite heartwarming to me. I'll just throw that out there. and I've only been there once.
Yeah.
That you've been there multiple times.
Yeah.
And it's a special place, and which is just, and I think it's just so we'll just, and I realize that we're now at this point, I'm blending our inexplicability with sociological contextualization. So yeah. But I is editor-in-chief of State of the Ozarks, I'm comfortable within that realm, so I'm just going to roll with it, because I kind of have to on occasion. But there is just this, to me, this very comforting reality that there is this world beyond our immediate sight. And to me, that is very humbling. That is an encouragement to walk with respect, to walk with a sort of with your eyes and your ears open, so to speak. And a beautiful sense of wonderment. But it is something that I try to be very cognizant of. I know I do, when I walk into Kendrick, when I walk into Ritchie Mansion, when I had the opportunity to walk into the Olivia, into the Old English Inn, to walk in with a sense of humility, with a sense of gentleness, with the sense that I have the honor to share this space with those that have gone on before, with the energies that are still resonating, and to approach it in that way. I like approaching the world through that lens.
Well, I do too, and I do, as well as then trying to look at a situation and determine what's going on. But first and foremost, yeah, it's respect, and whether you're viewing it as activity or you're just viewing it as history, in essence, it's kind of the same thing.
It really is kind of the same. It is, and I really sort of love that. Now, jumping to this article that that we started referencing
Mm-hmm.
for tonight as a kickoff. Livescience.com, 10 paranormal videos debunked by live science staff of April 27th, 2011. There are things that I really like about this article, and I've watched most of the videos that are referenced in it. And I have things that I like about the article. I have things that I don't like about the article. I'm going to throw both of them out here. The thing that I like about the article is that it really helps make sort of a clearinghouse list of be skeptical about these things when approaching paranormal videos or information that is thrown at you. And we can dig into those, and I do like that. I also like well, we'll get into that in a second. The thing that I found about the article that was perhaps just a little perturbing for me was it is written, to me, it is written in a rather jocular tone that is saying, oh, look at us, we weren't fooled by these stupid things. But the examples that they pull aren't hard to debunk.
Right. They're fairly obvious. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're back.
Yeah, we're back. In some cases, just a little bit goofy. And that, there's this while I value the sort of the list of critical analyses, the tone of paranormal doesn't exist because this list of 10 videos has been easily debunked seems a little short-sighted.
Well, it is, and it's it's grabbing the low fruit. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's the easy examples, but that is one, but that is sort of a starting point for analysis. Is that you have to look at some of those more obvious things, and you'd be surprised how many don't. And with enthusiasts that are just, they want to believe so badly, and there's a meme that goes around in paranormal circles. It's almost a pun, when that is, of a, say, of a yard or something, and you see trees and this kind of thing, and there's a couple of circles and an arrow, and it says, if you have to circle it and draw an arrow pointing to it, it probably isn't good evidence, or something like that. But you get a lot of that, and people will oh, I see this and this, and you're looking at it and you're going, I don't see anything, I see a couple of leaves or something, or and a lot of times, and here's another thing, is that, and it happens in video as well as photos, distortion.
Yes.
Clarity of the image. Often people will jump to conclusions because there is pixelation, or there is some glare or something. And I always think of it in terms of old family photos from the 60s and 70s, and if you look at those photos and you see red eyes and you see a glare on one side, everyone, no one looks at those photos and says, that's a ghost, that's this. But now that people are so focused on trying to find these things, that you will get a lot of people, I took this picture and my daughter's sitting here, but what's this behind her? And and it's no different than the pictures from 50, 60 years ago, and you're going, oh, it's reflection of the lamp against the wall or whatever. but it surprises me that, I look, back when I was younger and people's perspective, and they would go, the picture didn't come out great,
Right.
Yes. and we have, for a certain part of the population, we have changed that perspective, that in any anomaly, anything that's not perfectly crisp and in focus means something.
Right. There's something afoot. And again, I think that it is that desire to contextualize, and a desire for proof, to give us some grounding, oftentimes by individuals who do have a higher degree of sensitivity. So they're sensing, in many cases, not all, but sensing things that are difficult to explain, that in some cases may make them feel isolated. And they are grasping for a tangible, they're grasping for tangible evidence to help them feel less alone.
I think that's fair, or it's validation, that they want some sort of validation. And it's odd that I think that there's a really big shift in that from, say, 30-40 years ago.
It is.
And
it is.
And I'm there's probably a myriad list of cultural reasons, but there is a noticeable shift that, which I think makes it even more important to try to be objective looking at these things.
It does. And I think, now I would posit that, and of course this is I'll classify this as a non-secular viewpoint that I'm going to posit, which is, in order to be objective, one must also objectively hold out for the possibility of supernatural / paranormal.
Exactly. I mean, you have, that's the thing, is you have to hold out the possibility, the possibility of contradictory positions. And that's sort of the starting point. And a lot of people have a really hard time doing that. Simultaneously holding to contradictory ideas as having some validity, whether or not you don't have to agree with both, but you have to acknowledge logically that there's validity on both sides.
Yes. And that I think is something that I see secular skepticism struggle with.
Yeah, I agree.
That it's and then, not saying that there isn't a place for it. I think that is also very, very important. Jumping, well, one of the things, and I'll throw this out. It's very common for, I would say it's probably common for both of us, to be presented with, hey, look at this picture. See what I see. And there is a social pressure to not want to hurt the person's feelings if we don't see what it is that they see.
That's true. And I think sometimes that does lead to either agreeing with them, sort of making yourself believe that.
Yeah.
Or not knowing how to handle it. And I think that's, I think you have to, look at it as, well, I understand, where you're coming from, but here's what I'm seeing. And, you can't just say, that's the problem, socially, it's not acceptable to just say, well, you're just wrong. That's silly or whatever. And, but I usually then kind of go into then what else is going on, what are your experiences, why, try to figure out why they are seeing something that at least I'm not seeing.
Yes.
And often if you approach it that way, you kind of get to the root of the cause of, this is, they're wanting to see something because of a particular reason,
Right.
or they've had some other experience that has sort of, shaded their, put, rose tinted glasses on one way or the other.
Hmm.
And so at that point, then you can sometimes start a dialogue of, well, this might be it, or, here's what I would look for, that kind of thing. And I think too often, skeptics just want to uh, invalidate the person,
Yes,
and, and not engage in a constructive dialogue.
I agree. And I think it's important for individuals who might be approaching us, or might be watching the video, approaching us, is understand that we may need to look at it and say, no, I really don't think that there's anything in this photo or this evidence, quote unquote. I don't think that this is evidence. But that doesn't mean that your experiences are invalid.
That's very true. And I think, and um, beforehand, we were mentioning that before we got on here, that's one thing that often doesn't happen is you have to look at, quote, what the evidence is, and whether or not there's validity to it, or an explanation. But then
Yes.
the person's experience, their subjective experience, can be valid, and that separation doesn't often happen. And so, often skeptics will say, well, this evidence doesn't make sense, or is explained by something else, so their experience must be invalidated as well.
Yes.
And that's not necessarily the case. Now, there are cases where people perhaps are in flights of fancy, or under, basically delusions from, say,
Hmm.
mental health conditions, etc.,
Yes.
medication, etc.
Hmm.
But if you can eliminate those kind of factors, then their own experience has validity, even if it can't be explained rationally.
Yes. I absolutely agree. Now, something I'm clearly obsessing over this live science.com article.
Never sent it to you.
I know. I know. I find a lot of um, social contextualization questions within it.
Mm-hmm.
And something that I found, and I don't disagree with this, on several different points, they're going, this major news outlet believed these people, this major news outlet believed these people, this major news outlet believed these people, but we didn't, and
Yeah.
we proved them wrong. Well, again, low-hanging fruit. A lot of the, we've got the, for people who might be familiar, might be unfamiliar, wondering what it is we're talking about. So that just as a quick list, dead alien found in UFO hotspot in Russia. Turns out that two teenagers made the alien body out of chicken skin and old bread. Ghost in the closet that has less than compelling evidence of a door opening on an edited video. Magnetism versus stickiness, a 7-year-old Serbian boy who frighteningly reminds me of myself at that age. Apparently things stick to him. Cheerios stuck to me at that age. And also honeygrams. Hoax in the, I was kind of the same level of chubbiness too, just for the record. Hoax in the Holy Land. A light that looks like it was digitally inserted that comes down to the dome of the rock and then disappears. A video footage of a fighter jet formation near the El Bosque Chilean Air Force Base. And they're going, oh, look, it's there, but then it's also like in the immediate foreground, like it's a bug or something. Mainly a bug. Alien Autopsy in 2006, special effects artist confessed it was a hoax. Cloaked spaceship on a coronal mass ejection near the planet Mercury scan. Alien pig, which was a pig with hydrocephalus and apparently a snout defect. Creepy critter. Didn't live very long. Mothership over London. Glowing dots and ovals put into a sky with a very small handful of people that just happened to be staged looking up in the sky at the same time. And then a blurry, very blurry video of a apparent or alleged cryptid walking across the road in immediate proximity, like 20 feet away, and yet too blurry to make out. Although it does appear that the said cryptid, which is human shaped and human in movement, also may or may not be waving at the camera as it crosses the road. And in various
wasn't friendly.
Very, very friendly cryptid. I'm with Mitch Hedberg that the really frightening thing is that it isn't that the photos of Bigfoot are out of focus. It is the fact that Bigfoot is out of focus. And the idea of an unfocused, of a giant blurry cryptid gadding about in the wilderness is actually more terrifying than the other options. But in various ways, in various forms, number of these reports, now this is what I'm getting to, a number of these reports have been featured on the Daily Mail. They've been picked up on the Daily Mail, MSNBC, Fox News, the Huffington Post, CBS, LA Times, et al., and others. And
some of those more surprising than others.
Yes. And that, to me, that there is, I'll see if I can articulate my concept on this, because I have this idea, and it's not actually snarky. It is actually not snarky, which is surprising for me. Just a heads up. That, first of all, with the current, stepping into the understanding of the current concept of news is entertainment.
Yes.
That we really, that's very difficult for us.
We have blurred the distinction between news and entertainment.
Yes, and it's very difficult for us to be critically sophisticated enough, and I don't mean that from a classist perspective, but just an analysis perspective, to understand that the news to which we are exposed isn't what we think of as news. It is essentially infotainment.
Most of it is, yes.
And of course, what blurs that is that it's mostly reporting on things that actually happen. And so the information that we get, we're like, but this really happened or is happening, therefore it's news, not entertainment. And yet the platform is entertainment. It is designed to do specific things. And in order to fill that much space with content, there is a strong push to grab content, in some cases quite dubious content, that it can be, if it's presented correctly, you can always have the disclaimer, we just said what they said, we just quoted them, and so there is a sort of a hands-off journalism quality to it. And in that regard, that, things like UFO appearing over Holy Land, or North Carolina Bigfoot captured on camera, can very quickly translate to views or to clicks. And that's the name of the game. So there is a very common sense, but also a somewhat gratuitous aspect of utilizing the public's desire to know and its association with news as the place where one learns or one knows to follow these things. At the same, so there's certainly a mass media appeal to the question. At the same time, these examples to me really indicate that something that I see a lot in sort of superficial pop culture, that it pulls you in because you want to know. But even in answering the question, you're left with a sense of decontextualization and emptiness.
Because it's clickbait.
Yes, it is. Yes. And that is something that I think it's important to not mirror in these issues, and is important to, something that I feel we need more of is, I don't consider this to be primitivistic. I consider this to be extremely sophisticated in terms of sort of a three-dimensional or holistic contextualization of humanity and the life that we're living, that we really don't understand, but a shamanistic approach to these things, that even within the not answer, understanding that there are inexplicable things, we cannot answer these things, that there are ways, that there are holistic and oftentimes healthy and fulfilling ways to experience things that help us grow as human beings.
Yes, I would agree with that.
And make us less frightened of the alien pig in Guatemala.
Very fair.
Poor little feller. It's not his fault he had a snap defect.
P.T. Barnum would be proud.
He would. He really would. Ironically, we, 100 years, we may be, dedicating a museum to all of this. And that said, a place that we might conclude on, and I know that you've had these experiences. So, for example, in said article, there's one of the videos in which a closet door slowly opens and then a chair goes across. There's a lot of junk in the way. There's no way of telling that there isn't a string attached to both of them, and the video is edited.
Right.
Me and my iPhone could have faked the entire thing in about 5 minutes. So
yeah, there's a video that it came out of the UK several years ago, and it was set in a kitchen, and cabinet doors are opening and closing, and you have dishes flying, and as you slow it down, you can see fish line or some sort of string in certain situations, and you can see how items are being jerked that are from the tug. That it's just not, it just doesn't look like something, that actually has been pushed or flung or that kind of thing. But, superficially, it's like, oh my gosh, that's the most poltergeist activity in the world, but And ironically, it was released, and then it came out that basically they did it sort of a aha, this is how we did it. And but a lot of people just really bought into it. And but it was that there was so much, it was like it was too good to be true. There
Mhm.
everything but the kitchen sink was flying through that kitchen. So you know you you just have to you just have to look at those things. Just,
You do. You really do. Now, I want possibly as a place to just sort of conclude for tonight's episode. You guys have gotten on video a, a number of very interesting bits of evidence.
we
What,
have gotten a few.
yeah, what have been some of the standout moments for you guys for Paranormal Science Lab?
Actually, probably the best as far as video would probably be at the Kendrick house, and actually shadow people um, that in a couple of different locations. And one particular that, and I'm sure you've seen the clip in the hallway with what looks like a child playing peekaboo. And we've had professional photographers and videographers come in. We've tried to replicate it, try to get someone that this is what they do, explain how this could happen. No one's been able to replicate it. And it very much it seems to be interactive with as people walk through and so forth, playing peekaboo. And then actually another shadow form behind a door, leaning, and almost like leaning out and interacting with the other one that seems to be playing peekaboo. And actually another there in the standing in the kitchen doorway between the room with the operating table and the kitchen, a shadow person casting its own shadow. And again, no one being able to replicate it. And actually, though those were not actually during investigations, they were actually caught while just testing equipment and cleaning the house and so forth. And so it wasn't even that oh, we're trying to do this.
Yes.
uh it was just had a camera in because we were having trouble with the camera, kept switching out cameras and started reviewing what happened while we were there, and there it is. I think that's one thing too, is that people get so caught up these days with the idea of everything being spooky and everything's done at night, and it comes from the TV shows. And some of the best evidence that I've ever seen actually is caught during the day.
Yes.
With the lights on. And that was that situation. The lights were on.
Yeah. That it's there's not a lot of credence to the idea that this stuff only happens at night. It obviously doesn't.
No. And actually, people actually see things. When they do see or hear things, it's usually during the day because most people are asleep at night.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's one of those things. I think that one of the more other interesting things are balls of light that have been caught on camera. And I think that delves into the whole orb thing that, what most people view as orbs are not. It's dust, pollen, moisture. Mm-hmm. But there are things that are not, quote, those orbs. And they are, when you see it, it's very different. It looks like plasma. It's three-dimensional. It's not nice and neat and round. Um, and, changes shape and everything. Think of like a lava lamp, things like that. And caught those kind of things on camera and watch them split in two and come back together and things like that. And, um, I find that very, very interesting. And I guess the sort of the corollary of when people say, well, how's that different than a regular orb? Well, it's three-dimensional. It's like it's internally lit, has mass.
Mhm.
Reminds you of the spook light, really.
Yes. Yes.
If anyone's ever seen a ghost light, yeah. And and I've seen those kind of things with my own eyes, and then caught them on camera.
Right.
And I think the thing too that people don't realize when you're talking about video or photographic evidence, that it's very, very rare.
Mhm.
You can take 10,000 photos before you catch anything interesting. And same with video. I mean, you could capture 10,000 hours of video, nothing, and then catch an anomaly. Um, but so visual evidence is not real common. So I think that's one thing when you're looking at things, especially if you're looking at things on the internet and everything, keep that in mind, is that if you've got a channel that says, oh, we've got 10,000 videos of this and that, question, because it's just hard to get that many hours in to capture
It
evidence.
is.
Um,
Yes.
I think one of the other most compelling video evidence that I ever caught was actually, it was at a farmhouse, and actually where a fella had killed himself, and in the room that we were in. And we actually caught photo, just still photo in another room, just taking a photo into the room. And it was actually a bathroom. And um, on the photo, looks like a man standing, leaning on the lavatory, and you can see him clearly. I mean, it's transparent, but you can see he's wearing um, a white undershirt and trousers, and he's got a wristwatch on, and he's balding. And so then we caught image of him coming down the stairs and walking across the room. But the interesting thing is we were running two video cameras. One was real time and one was high speed, and we were running it at 1,000 frames per second. And real time is 29.94. So real time captured nothing, did not have anything on it. The high speed camera caught, you see him, and it looks like the same image, walk down the stairs, walk through the dining room we're in the living room, and walk over to a corner of the room and turn around and sit. There's no chair there, but sit, and he's in a sitting position as if he's sitting in a chair, like just suspended. And we found out from police reports that was the location of the chair that he was in when he killed himself.
Oh, wow.
Um, but
Mhm.
but again, if you were just recording with a regular video camera, you caught nothing.
Right.
So
Right.
what that means was it was moving faster than that camera could catch motion.
Yes. Yeah.
And to give an idea for people, the human eye can catch motion up to about equivalent of 240 frames per second. So if it's moving faster than that, you don't see it.
Yes.
So when people say, well, it can, camera didn't catch anything, it could be nothing there. It all depends on what you are recording and how,
Mhm.
So there was something there that was moving that fast.
Yes. I think that's incredible. I love that.
It's one of the, yeah, that's one of the more fascinating things that I've seen. And it's things like that that really make me think you have to look at these things in so many different ways, because again, if you just quote take it at face value, and if I just looked at that one camera, oh, nothing happened here.
Right. And you could be completely objective in that analysis.
That's right. I would have no reason to doubt that conclusion.
Yes. Now, just curious from a more of a perhaps folkloric or contextualization aspect,
Mhm.
a non-tech aspect.
Okay.
How did that location present itself to you? How did it feel, essentially?
It was very heavy. It was,
Mhm.
um, the, I would say the air felt very charged. I mean, you really felt like you were in a, in a space where you're about to have an electrical storm, and you
Yeah.
get very charged air. Um, that's pretty much how the house felt. Although it didn't have high EMF. Did not seem to have anything to do with the wiring or anything like that. Couldn't find any evidence of that.
Yeah.
But you just felt like you were, in a field of static electricity, pretty much,
Yes. And
in
that's,
a lot of the house.
yeah, that EMF detectors have become extremely common in terms of
Yeah,
quote unquote ghost hunting. We use them as well. Um, but I think it's easy to mistake the fact that that's only a very small part of an investigative picture.
it is. It is. And, in even if you have anomalies, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's paranormal.
Yes. And a disconcerting aspect of this, that one could have seemingly inexplicable EMF spikes, electromagnetic field spikes, that are actually quite explicable,
Mm-hmm.
that we just aren't figuring out where the wiring is, or where a signal is coming from.
Exactly.
And so that you could, in theory, have a super high EMF in a location, but no paranormal activity whatsoever.
That's true.
At the
Well,
same,
and
yeah,
I've told you the story. We had a case like that, um, extremely high EMF in the bedroom, and the wife, the husband worked at night, and she was there alone. She'd wake up. They just moved in there within the last couple months, and she would see shadow men and so forth, and so it was freaking her out. Well, the breaker box was next to the bed, and it was huge. It was large enough to run an apartment building. I've never seen something like that in a house. And so the amount of EMF, was about 20, 30 times what, even a relatively high level would be in a house. And
yes,
so they moved the bed and away from that to an area where EMF wasn't high, and activity went away.
yes,
So,
absolutely. Oh,
but her
and
experience was valid. I mean, she was having a real
oh yeah,
experience. It was just what was causing it.
yes. And then, as you just noted, that there are situations in which you can have paranormal activity, but very little EMF.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's not a litmus test by any means.
No, it is data gathered.
Yes.
Um,
And you hope over time that maybe there's some sort of pattern or something that, eventually we can all go, oh, this is what's going on. But
yeah,
um, it's gathering, it's a lot of data over time that hopefully starts painting the picture.
yes. And I think that's possibly a good kind of a positive place to wrap up, in the sense that the goal, hopefully the community goal and the collective goal, is to gather this data to paint comparatively effective pictures of the past and of the present, to help contextualize things that individuals are experiencing, and also help people just to understand the significance of a variety of locations.
I think that's a very fair summation.
It's fun.
It is. And we'll be back next Wednesday.
Yes, we will. And we hope you join us at the Ball House on Saturday, or Always Buying Books also on Saturday. And we'll continue to, and of course, please, if you have questions, comments, ideas, research topics, research locations, public or private, let us know. We respect both.
Yes, we do. And so have a good week all, and we'll see you next Wednesday.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Alex.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, everyone.